everyone, welcome back to the Carlton Rap podcast. What a win on Thursday night. It's so odd feeling this good after a win, after so many years of losses and just constant failures, but here we are 10 years later, 10 whole years later, and finally we're going into the new week with a bit of optimism and something to smile about. On my own again today, keeping it audio due to just camera issues because I don't have a proper camera to record with. It takes a lot of time to export, so stuck with audio today. Thought I'd just go over round one, talk about my thoughts, sort of who played well, and a bit of a preview to round two against the Bulldogs. So let's start from the start. I guess I went in very pessimistic. If you listen to my round one preview with Pommy, I was fairly confident the Tigers would do very similar to what they did in round one 2021 and 2020 for that case. I just didn't believe we had the team to knock them over. And I think a lot of people were forgetting what that Richmond team can be most of the time, because I guess with all those injuries they had in 2021, people sort of knew them as a really unsettled, unbalanced team for the most part of that 2021 season, but they were sort of back to, I'd say, full strength. And I guess it just worried me because that full strength team had it over us for the last couple of years, so I was very, very anxious, and probably the worst I felt going into round one, nerves wise, because I knew this was it. I thought this was the last year for it to mean something, because I think if we lost this year, a win next year wouldn't mean as much, assuming Richmond are probably declining from this point onwards. So I knew this was an important occasion, just on the basis that Richmond is still competitive. They're still a good team, and it just, gives us a bit of respect in the competition. And certainly turning up on Thursday night, it just kicked in straight away how nervous I was. I think the days leading up to it, I didn't really think about it and didn't really want to think too much into results. I was just expecting a loss. It was more of just, okay, cool, turn up, get dealt with, we lose, on to round two sort of thing. But I got there and I was very, very anxious. I think Richmond running out on the ground sort of did it for me, because I hadn't seen them in person for quite a while. I mean, I saw them in the Anzac Day game last year, but otherwise I didn't really watch Richmond, purely just because they never interested me watching them with the team they had for most of the year. But just seeing the Dusty, even the small forwards, your Shy Boltons, Noah Bolters, Dylan Grimes, it just sort of got me a bit nervous, thinking, geez, I don't think we can match up with these guys, at least for 4 quarters. And then first bounce, that's it, really kicked in from that point. And honestly, I was not loving it. I wasn't loving what I was seeing. I thought, here we go again, as probably most people did, and I don't think it was just me. But I'm probably the most pessimistic Carlton supporter out of all the Carlton fan channels, I guess you can say, on all the socials. I guess what I heard, even at the Blue Abroad season launch, I was sort of hearing all these, we'll win easily. Yeah, Ari said 6 goals. This is way too optimistic. I was like, we've played 2 good preseason games, but there's just no way that's going to happen. It's just not in our nature to do something like that. And then seeing that, I was like, yeah, I knew they were on. I knew that we would just collapse. And yeah, it just wasn't a good first quarter, and it was purely down to skill error, I think. no, well, our skill execution in the end, it just was really poor. We didn't have a lot of intent going forward. It was a matter of, we were just trying to find our feet, but we were way too slow in finding our feet. And it was probably lucky that Richmond didn't run away with it early on, because I went into quarter time and just thought, next goal is massive in a way, because I think it was 9-29 at that point. I was thinking, geez, 9-35, I know it's early, but like that does kill you a bit, and that takes a lot of effort to come back from that sort of margin. And that ended up being the biggest margin, 20 points, and that was what we came back from. So it would have been interesting even in the fourth quarter to see if Richmond had kicked another goal. Was that the turning point? I mean, I know we in the end we kicked 7 goals straight, so we could have come back from much further down. But realistically, if we were much further down than 20 points, we wouldn't have wanted to come back anyway. So going into the second quarter, I set myself up for a loss already. I was already really disappointed. I thought, cool, I'm sure, like, we kicked the first goal and I was like, okay, we'll come back. I can see that they're going to pick it up and, turn the intensity up, which they did. But I was just thinking, yeah, this is just very familiar when we look at the past 2 years and what Richmond have done across really the last sort of 2 quarters, where they turn it on and push away from us. But we stuck with them, and I think there are a lot of contributing factors to it. I mean, obviously Cripps, Kennedy, those guys had great games. And Cripps, I mean, I always said he would never return to 2019 form, but in all honesty, looking now, I think he's having some resemblance. I don't think he's exactly like that, because I think those two teams are quite different in the style of play. I think this one is a bit more team orientated and will do the little things, whereas 2019 was more focused on just contested footy and getting through a pack and just finding a way himself. Kennedy, I mean, I love Kennedy, and I was always really angry with the way he was treated under Teague, purely because I knew the talent that he had, and he always had that ability to change the game and make such an impact, and he never got played. And he spent weeks in the reserves, and that it was quite amazing he never left the club after that period. But look at him now, he's absolutely thriving and making a terrific impact. Another factor I'll go on to say was definitely Doc. I mean, that goal was very much a team lifter. And I mean, obviously, the reaction around the stadium, just seeing them crowding when he kicked that goal, was terrific. And I think it picked us up a little bit. And it sort of, it showed that connection we'd formed in the off-season. And it gave me a bit more confidence than usual. I was just thinking, yeah, like, these things last, and usually those type of things, when they happen in a game, the energy from that dies off once the momentum switches again. So all that momentum we had from Doc scoring and that emotional moment, it sort of died off. And I was sort of thinking, yeah, okay, I don't think we can maintain this. It would have been that sort of moment, like, as fantastic as it was in the second quarter, it makes me smile thinking, Jez, like, imagine if that happened in the last quarter, when we were coming back. It would have been insane. But it was great that it happened either way. It was, one of those things that I wouldn't say never see again, but you probably wouldn't see for a very long time, for someone like him to, come back from what he had and what he had to suffer through. So that was a fantastic moment. But going into half time, I was happier with what I saw. I just think there were a couple things that were very repetitive to the last 2 years, where Richmond would rebound off our errors in the forward line, and they'd absolutely roll us through the middle of the ground. They would expose our turnovers and flood the midfield, flood the centre, and they would find a target most of the time. That's what they've been doing in the last 2 years, which yet again spoke with Pom in the preview, and he said that last year that was 45 points. There were 45 points that came from defensive turnovers. So it was very reminiscent of those last 2 years, and I thought, geez, we haven't changed in terms of our game approach. And it did frustrate me in the end, seeing that nothing had changed. I thought we would have learnt from our errors in the last 2 years, but we weren't prepared for a lot of the time. I think it was lucky that we were set up really well behind the ball for that long kick and long entry into Richmond's forward line. A lot better than the last 2 years, and I think that definitely helped to stem the flow a bit. Third quarter definitely started to rip me apart. Frustrated me quite a lot, because I just thought we lost the game purely off just poor efforts, poor execution, and everything we'd done in that third quarter to, get our hands on the footy, to play a real flowing game, find our way around the ground without, having to kick on or go backwards. We knew where we were in that second quarter. We knew where to go to, whereas this third quarter, Richmond totally smashed us across the ground. They outnumbered us at most contests, and they ultimately wanted it more in the end. I think they definitely had much more intent to push forward, to find an open target, and it killed us. And I thought that was probably where we lost the game the most. Well, I mean, we didn't lose it, but I thought in terms of our negatives in the game, so that's where we lost our game plan, our game structure, our game style. I think that's where we lost it in that third quarter. So there are a lot of things that we need to improve on going into round 2, into round 3, into round 4. But I think we did well to stem their goal run. I think it could have been much worse. I think we came out very lucky in 3/4 time to not be down by much more. And maybe this is just me sort of overreacting purely just because of that nervous energy I had on the day. But I was always reverting back to those 2021 years and just thinking it's the same thing happening again, where we get so close and we stay with them all game, and then we lose track and they get back in front and stay there the whole time. And I was sort of waiting for the one moment that killed the game off for us, and I'll give a perfect example that I say to most people from 2021 was Harry Mackay marking in the goal square and turning around and playing on. I think it would have put us up by 9 points. And he, obviously went through for a point. I think I was holding the ball. And we were still ahead, about 15 minutes left in the third quarter, whole half to go. But I knew psychologically they had the edge, and that was enough. Little moments like that where they knew we'd look back at that and think, geez, that's where it got away from us, and that was a really crucial moment. So I was sort of waiting for one of those moments to happen on the night, but it didn't, and I think we kept our cool. We were able to sort of oppress what they were doing with the 50 meters the 50 meter calls towards us. We were really good in manipulating the rule, and it gave us some very opportunistic results. And we kicked 2 goals, 3 goals out of it, and it really helped. And those are things that we probably wouldn't have done in past years, just due to a lack of footy smarts and the ability to read the play and sort of read the environment really well. And I think we did that much better during this game, and it did give us a chance. And now I'll move on to the final quarter. After that Shy Bolton goal, I completely, in all honesty, wrote them off. And I'm sure look, I'd say 50% at least did the same. I thought that was the moment. I thought it was just a poor marking, a lot of space left open, an easy goal. One that shouldn't have been conceded. But Shai Bolton's very nifty and he's able to read the play very well. He kicked that and I sort of died inside a little bit. I was like, geez, like this is probably going to get worse than what it was at the time. And that's why I was saying, like, I thought, geez, could get 26 points, 32 points, and it's just embarrassing. And I was pissed off. And look, in all honesty, I had a lot of Richmond supporters around me that were just very egotistical. You know, had an older bloke that, you know, just one of those annoying guys that just has to comment on everything and be funny when it's not that funny. And then two kids behind me that I'd say were 14 or 15, and two kids who would have never experienced a losing Richmond side, because we think back, their last terrible year, minus the 2014-15 period, was, oh no, not even that, even the 2015-16 period was 2011-10, 9, and those kids would have been around 4 or 5. They wouldn't have remembered it, and they were, you know, giving insults to Cripps. A lot of the players, Carlton will choke this, and just in my head I'm thinking, God, like, it just upsets me. I was like, geez, we're probably not going to win this, and they're just going to be right. And I wanted to prove them wrong so bad. And look, we did, which I'll get to later, but the one moment that sort of said to me, their mindset has changed, it was close to centre wing, right near where I was. It was a boundary throw-in, down by 20, and Chera looks at the scoreboard on level 2. And usually in past you'd see players on TV look at the scoreboard and they'd sort of put their head down and they wouldn't really put much effort in after that. No head down from Chera, simply looked at it and composed himself and won that clearance without a doubt, put his body on the line. And I thought, geez, these guys are actually a little bit serious this year. They do want it still, and I was happy to see that. Kicked that goal, the Durden goal, and I was like, yep, cool, false hope. Can't remember who kicked the one afterwards. I think it was the Jack Martin goal, or someone before him at least. And I was like, oh, cool, they're getting me a bit excited here, but ultimately we're just going to fall apart. I can't remember who put us in the lead, but I was sort of, you know, getting a bit hyped up, getting a bit, oh my God, we're actually pushing here, we're giving a proper effort, not just falling away, where we really had no right to be in that game with 20 points down in the context of just past seasons and past efforts. But the Zach Fisher goal set me off, and I was just alive, and I thought, oh my God, like, what's happened? You know, 10 minutes ago I was sitting on this boundary line watching Chera look at a 20-point deficit, and now we're up by 10 points. And the crowd, I mean, there is nothing better than seeing a bunch of limbs go up on level 1, 360 pretty much, everywhere you look. It was really, really fantastic, and I thought, okay, we've probably got a very good chance to hold this. And I was still very nervous we'd lose. I was just scared. It's just fear, and it is a lot of fear watching these guys sort of knowing what they've done in past years. They always find a way to roll us. And then the goal that put us up by 16, which I think was O'Brien, that sort of sealed it for me, because you'd see Richmond fans leaving, they all went quiet. The people behind me went absolutely quiet. They were still trying to, the saltiness came in. The two kids behind me seemed to always, they just kept making these salty comments. May have said a couple very nice words to them about being sore losers and being quiet, but and that did shut them up in the end. but it was like relief. And I think Ari said this as well on his fan cam, that it was relief, and I felt that as well. It was very unusual. I went out of the game thinking, did that happen? Like, it felt like a practice match, because that isn't meant to happen to us in a way. Like, we're not meant to leave round one that happy. And it was just insane. And I was looking, I was thinking, there's no way we knocked that Richmond team off. Just purely based off what they've done, the calibre of talent they have, I was totally shocked. Totally shocked that's what happened in the end. But thrilled nonetheless. It's just insane to go to ladder and you see 4 points and one game played. It was just odd, because 10 years ago I was a 8-year-old that really, I don't remember that game very much. The only goal I remember was the Chris Yaron one. That, I don't know if it won goal of the year, but it definitely got something. But that was the only thing I remember from that game. So it was just insane. It was really insane, and just to be around that atmosphere, it was terrific. And I really do commend Voss for giving them that mindset to come back from that deficit. And it was shocking. It was just shocking in a good way, because it just never ever turns out that way for us, where we can come back from a lead and really stamp our authority on a game, and we did it. And it frustrated me, because for 3 quarters I was like, where's this Melbourne performance? Not necessarily the Melbourne performance, just their centre clearance work. It all wasn't there. It disappeared, and I was frustrated. I was like, this never, these pre-season improvements are never transferable into the normal season. I feel like they always just stay there. But it did come in the fourth. And it makes such a difference when it does, because they dominate with that type of, when they get the game on their terms. And I think it will be a very interesting season, and I think games will purely be dictated on our midfield. I think if our midfield plays poorly, it's game over, because I think our defensive structures and forward structures do the job. Most of the time when we go up forward, we can find an option. And, when the ball does go in our back line, we're able to adapt and change a couple things, and we can hold our opponents down most of the time. But I think our midfield is really where it is. And it's, scary to think that you got someone like Sam Walsh coming into it in a couple of weeks' time. So that was sort of the key takeaway in terms of game sense. I just think midfield is our key to winning. I don't think it's got to do with anything else. When you've got the likes of Cripps, Chera, Hewitt, Kennedy, just running around that midfield group, they can dictate a game, and you saw that they find their way around the rucks, which we haven't been able to do very well in past years. So it was great to see. In terms of players, I'll go through a couple. I'm not going to do votes purely just because I think it's harder to give votes when you're at the game and you're very emotional and not taking in things as well as people do on TV. I seem to have very different opinions when watching the game in person and on TV. But I'll go through a couple and give my opinions. Kennedy, Chera, Cripps, Hewitt, perfect in their role playing. Like I said with Kennedy, he's just a really elite player, and he's someone I think we really could have had such a better year with last year on a consistent basis. But it's great to know that he will be getting the spot each week. Considering form. Chera's interesting, and I think I've said this to a couple people, like pre-season, I don't see him getting that many touches. It's not till I look at the stat sheet afterwards that I think, I didn't know he had such a great game. And same with people like Hewitt, you don't notice they get their hands on the footy so much until you see afterwards. In terms of our defenders, Doherty, quite insane. For a bloke to just come back and dominate like that was really fantastic. And a goal. What more can you ask for a goal on your first game back following the cancer treatment? That's a very special thing to happen. I'm loving the way Saad's moving this year. He seems a bit more comfortable with the way we're playing. I think last year he was very unsure structure-wise because he was still the same player that we drafted from Essendon. He just seemed to never be sure where he was meant to be going, where he was kicking to. Whereas he seemed much more composed around the footy, and although there were aspects, of his game that were rushed, it wasn't anything that was, out of the ordinary, that was not due to pressure and little things like that. So he did play his role really well. And I was happy to see him back in the groove. And same with Williams. They both did what they needed to really well. And they do provide just a great outlet coming out of defensive 50 that you can set up for in front of the ball, because you know where they'll run and you know where they'll present the ball to. So it was great to see those two clicking again. My favourite, Will Setterfield. Look, people weren't too happy with this game, and I can understand why. He sort of seemed a bit out of touch, but I think he played his role really well, and his pressure was just really up there when we needed it to be. And he's that type of player that he'll just do what is right in the time, no matter the stats that he's collecting. He just does what is needed of him 24/7. So I think that was really important in the end, and I think that's why people sort of are very critical of him, because he's not that efficient with the ball sometimes. He'll tend to overuse, but off ball he's very impactful, and I think a lot of people miss out on really witnessing him doing that sort of thing. Mitch McGovern, I love watching Mitch. I think backline really suits him. He plays very similar to Jeremy. Just the way they jump, the way they mark, the way they kick. And he's really just a forward. And I'm sure in his mind he's thinking, I'm going to go lead up to this Richmond midfielder and mark his ball, as if he's a Richmond forward. And it's probably a good mentality to have. But he killed it. He's really settling in very well, and I hope he's very consistent. I'm going to move into the players I thought weren't that great. I'm going to start with Pitternet. But look, this is very biased because I've never had a very good view of Pitternet, and I've never liked the way he's played. And look, he had some very good moments in the fourth quarter, but I think as a ruckman, he just doesn't give us the right hit-outs on a consistent basis. And what I mean by that is that I'm sure people like Cripps, Chera, they've got running patterns in that centre clearance. They know that one's going to be a spitter, one's going to sit out the back and run through. They know where they need to run, but Pitternet does not provide the ball where they need it to be about 50% of the time, which is really frustrating. I guess when you sort of analyse the game really deeply, it does make a really big difference, and especially against. And I know Nank's a very good ruckman as well. He's talented in what he does, and I'm sure it's not as easy as just jumping up and tapping it to the right spot. I can understand that, but I just don't think he's improved at it at all. I just think it's the same thing of last year where he just hits it down and he doesn't make a massive effort to really find a running midfielder. And looking at his hit-out win percentage, hit-out to advantage, 36%. which is that's disappointing. That's the numbers he was averaging last year. It was worse. I mean, it's a bit improvement, but it's only been one game. But his averages last year was around 33%. 6 hitouts to advantage, the same as Nank. However, Nank had less hitouts, so his hitout to win percentage was practically 50%. So it makes a really big difference, and I was just frustrated with the way he was presenting it to our midfielders who made really good runs. And you saw in that last quarter that when it does go hit, when he does hit out to advantage, we practically create a chance every time, and we go back and we get a score at least every time we win that midfield battle. Whereas when we don't, we're very, I wouldn't say, trying to think of the word to say here, like we're very flat-footed when we don't, and we always become a bit confused of where we need to run when that centre ball isn't won. So yeah, for me, Pitto just, look, I wasn't too happy. I wasn't too happy with what I saw most of the time, and I'm sort of waiting for Tom to really come out of his shell and explode, really, because even he had 3 hitouts to advantages, and a 40% percentage to advantage. Already high, and I know it's less hitouts, but it's small, and he's a much less developed ruckman, and he's averaging better, hitouts to advantage win percentages. So little things like that just make a team much better or much worse, and I think for Pitto, he's just not making it heaps better. And look, another player, and I was really, really critical of Lockie O'Brien, and I was really disappointed with his game. I don't think he provides anything to this team, and I'm just sort of I don't think he's improved at all off season. Nothing to say that his spot in the side is cemented at all. I think Paddy Dow, if anything, and I don't love Paddy either, but I think Paddy's got much more potential than Lockie. Lockie's only got a left foot, and his left foot isn't even always accurate. So that's why it was just really disappointing seeing him just constantly screw up a lot of our contested ball, and his effort was quite pathetic at times. He would not run after his opponent very hard. There was a lot of action on my end where he was just jogging. He was just jogging after his opponent. No intent. He was really poor under pressure, and it was really disappointing. Very, very, very disappointing to watch him out there taking someone's spot, in my opinion. I think there are much better options than Lockie O'Brien, but ultimately he will probably exit eventually for Sam Walsh. Otherwise, a Honey, Kemp, there's a couple, but it was really disappointing. I'm just not a fan of Lockie O'Brien. I just don't think he's worth a spot in that team. There's not much more to say. Yeah, I people love him, and you can't argue with that. I just think people are getting carried away purely because of the last quarter impact, and maybe I am too, just purely because of the hatred I've had for him in the past couple of years. But it just stood out to me, a lot of the little things he does very poorly, which is more frustrating when the major things of the game he can't do very well. So that was really disappointing to watch him out there. 60% disposal efficiency, so I think he was 5th last in the team, 6th last. So it's very disappointing. I just don't think you can afford to have a bloke like that running around and not making much of an impact. It was very disappointing. But otherwise, I think that's where I'll leave it. Because, I mean, in terms of the future, look, I was happy with that win. And every time you come to this podcast, you're always going to hear the most pessimistic view. purely just so we keep getting brought back to reality when a loss comes, and I can at least say, yeah, I told you so. But no, in all honesty, I was very happy with it, and I'm sure we are all very happy. It's just relieving. And I was glad because, like I said at the start, it was our last year to sort of get a win that was meaningful against this lot in round one, and we did that. But there's still a lot to improve. I was sort of, after the emotion had died down, I was sort of looking back and thinking, geez, Richmond really had it over us for a lot of that game, and we didn't really do much to stop it at times. And we're facing ultimately a tougher opponent this week, and I think this Bulldogs game is probably a better indication of where we're at. But we do match up very well against the Bulldogs. Well, as seen in past years, we seem to always have an edge over them in the midfield and on the wins especially. We always run much harder than them and find gaps, expose them on offensive transition, as they're quite a narrow team in terms of the way they run. They're used to the Marvel Stadium pitch where it's very narrow and they downhill ski quite a lot, whereas we're used to a wider ground, so we're very good at catching them off guard and being prepared to rebound their turnovers. I'll sort of look a bit back at Bulldogs round one game. I was at that game against Melbourne, and they looked very strong, and I think the scoreline flatters Melbourne a little bit, not a lot. I just think the Bulldogs did a bit better than what the scoreline suggests. Their midfield, I heard something about Bontempelli possibly not playing, which, in all honesty, I still think they're a strum with or without him. He obviously makes a big difference, but it's going to be more of a motivator for them to say, look, let's show what we can do without him. But I think as well, at that Melbourne game, pressure was a huge thing. When Bulldogs were put under really, really hard, consistent pressure, they crumbled, and they had no method, no strategy to overturn that pressure. And that's when Melbourne kicked 4 in a row. They kicked 5 in a row. They knew how to expose Bulldogs with that pressure, and I think that's really important going into this game. Bringing the pressure to the Dogs and probably putting a lot of scoreboard pressure on them as well. I think the Dogs are a team that, since they've been very competitive for a while, when the game gets out of reach really quickly, I think it sort of kills them off way quicker. Whereas we saw last year, you keep giving them a sniff for longer and longer and longer, and they'll get you eventually. Whereas putting the game out of their reach early is much better. But now what I've seen with Richmond, you never know. We can be down and we can come back, obviously. But I think Bulldogs, the key to beating them is pressure for longer, and putting the pressure on them that leaves a lot of gaps open that we can transition really quickly. And I think as well with Ashley Hanson as senior coach, he'll obviously know quite a lot about their style, which is very important. I think I'll leave it at that for that game. It's very hard to preview by myself, I have to be quite honest. I like asking people questions, what they think. So it's very odd on my own sometimes. I don't know how to rebound my own thoughts. I'll give a prediction. Look, mate, there's going to be one time where I have to say we'll win. But for now, Bulldogs by 10. But I think we'll lead for the first half. And I think the Bulldogs might just have it over us in the second half. But I do expect a very competitive and tough game. And I'm excited. And something I haven't felt going to the footy in a while, in terms of you win round one and you can go to round two thinking, geez, we're a chance. We're actually a chance now. Whereas 0-1, I would have gone in saying we're not a chance. We just psychologically do not have the ability to beat the Bulldogs, just purely because of what this scenario has meant in the last couple of years. So it's great to be going in a bit more optimistic. I think the Bulldogs are going to really test us. They don't want to go on to it. Would really be a tough start to their season, especially when they have to play the Swans the week after. That's definitely not the thing they want to be going into that game with 0-2. But look, 2-0 for us would really just set up such a great environment, such a good energy around the club. Just the supporters, it would be fantastic. So we can cross our fingers and hope we get the job done. But I am predicting a Bulldogs win, unfortunately, just due to the fact that they cannot lose this game, and I think they'll just want it a bit more than what we will. But anyways, I hope everyone has enjoyed this podcast. Apologise that I'm on my own for this one. It's a bit hard now with uni starting to find people that can do it at the same times. So I do apologise if it is a bit boring to listen to just one person chatting about the game, but I hope besides that you've enjoyed the podcast. Let me know what you thought of the round 1 game, who stood out for you, best moment of the game, and your predictions heading into round 2. But until then,